Abraham Lincoln navigated the United States through its most existential crisis, but his own life began in total obscurity. Born in 1809 in a remote Kentucky log cabin, Lincoln had almost no formal education. He spent his early years in a world defined by manual labor and the physical constraints of the American frontier, yet he developed an intense drive to learn. In an environment stripped of intellectual resources, where books were rare and schools were almost non-existent, he sought out whatever reading material he could find. These harsh beginnings forced a radical self-reliance. Without mentors or institutional paths to follow, his progress depended entirely on his own internal drive to wrestle knowledge from the few books he could find. As Lincoln entered young adulthood, he realized his mind was his only escape from a life of physical labor. He began reading with a deliberate purpose, building the intellectual foundation he needed to leave the farm behind. In the fall of 1834, Springfield attorney John T. Stuart saw Lincoln's potential and lent him the necessary text to study the law. Unlike modern attorneys, Lincoln never attended law school. Instead, he sat in the rural village of New Salem and methodically taught himself the complex mechanics of the American legal system. By 1837, he was admitted to the bar and moved here, to Springfield, Illinois. He began practicing as a junior partner, trading the frontier for the state's growing commercial and legal center. Mastering the law without formal instruction proved he possessed a remarkable capacity for logic. He learned to dissect complex arguments and persuade juries, skills that would soon be tested on a national stage. Lincoln soon entered national politics as a congressman. In 1847, he demonstrated a willingness to challenge authority by introducing the Spot Resolutions, which aggressively questioned the justification for the Mexican-American War. After a brief return to his law practice, the 1854 Kansas-Nebraska Act pulled him back into the spotlight. The act threatened to expand slavery into new territories, and Lincoln emerged as one of its most articulate and fierce opponents. This 1860 political chart shows how deeply the country had fractured. With 4 major candidates and a map split by regional interests, his victory came from a profoundly divided electorate. This triggered the immediate secession of Southern states, physically tearing the country apart. The self-taught lawyer was now responsible for a dissolving nation. He faced the immense legal and moral task of forcing the Union to hold together. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, Lincoln's primary and immediate goal was the complete preservation of the Union. At this early stage of the conflict, his focus was on national unity rather than emancipation. To signal the government's resolve, Lincoln insisted that construction on the U.S. Capitol Dome continued despite the raging war. He used this construction as a strategic communications tool. By keeping the builders at work, he provided a physical sign to the public that the Union intended to survive. Beyond symbolism, he applied executive power to the conduct of the war itself, commissioning the Lieber Code to maintain military discipline and establish a formal legal framework for the conflict. Lincoln orchestrated every element of national power, from economic incentives to legal codes, to enforce the survival of the Republic. By 1862, the calculus of the war shifted. Lincoln recognized that saving the Union was now inextricably linked to dismantling the institution of slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation, effective in January 1863, legally redefined the conflict. By declaring those held in slavery in rebel states forever free, Lincoln committed the Union to a revolutionary struggle for human freedom. The human cost of that struggle became clear in November 1863. Following horrific casualties at Gettysburg, Lincoln was asked to deliver a few brief remarks at the dedication of a national cemetery. In just 272 words, he tied the Civil War to the principles of human equality found in the Declaration of Independence. This brief speech redefined the American identity, promising a new birth of freedom that elevated the nation's purpose beyond its original boundaries. As the war concluded in early 1865, Lincoln looked toward reconciliation. In his second inaugural address, he called on a fractured public to strive to bind up the nation's wounds with charity for all. On April 14, 1865, Lincoln attended a performance here, at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. An assassin's bullet brought a violent end to his leadership, occurring just as the peace he had orchestrated was beginning to take hold. The shock of the assassination recast the president as a national martyr, securing his legacy as the primary architect of a reunited America. Abraham Lincoln's life covers an immense distance, moving from a dirt-floor frontier cabin to the presidency at the center of the country's most violent crisis. He took command of a republic that was physically falling apart and ensured that a government of the people, by the people, for the people did not perish from the earth. Through his strategic genius and his ability to articulate the nation's highest ideals, he saved the Union and modernized the American commitment to human rights. The determination of this self-taught lawyer to preserve the Republic and expand the definition of liberty provided the foundation for the United States as it exists today.